I'm back. Julie Usher here. Today I'm doing a variation of my popular chocolate lace and chocolate doily videos. I'm going to be piping a freestanding chocolate cylinder, like the one you see here, that's perfect for housing puddings, mousses. I've got a rice pudding in here. You'll see me assemble it later. And berries. Just makes a lovely, elegant presentation where the chocolate is really the centerpiece. The reason it's a variation on the other two videos is A, it's freestanding, so I'm not shaping it around a cake. And B, it's two-tone. I've got two chocolates in there. I've got a little bit of dark and a little bit of white in and around the dark at the bottom. So I'm going to show you how to do that. First of all, I decided the size cup that I wanted. And this is about 3 inches. I just so happened to my Heinz vinegar jar is the perfect diameter. It's also straight-sided. So this is going to be the form against which I'm going to wrap the chocolate. That said, the jar is wrapped with parchment paper because I'm going to be laying chocolate up against it. I need to get it off the jar. It will stick to glass. Let me show you how I did that. Basically, once I determined the size of it, I just cut a piece of parchment paper. I like to use the roll parchment paper for this particular application because it's curvy, so it nicely conforms to the bottle without me having to work to bend it. And I've cut it maybe 3 or so inches tall. I want to cut it higher than the chocolate template, the template that I'm going to actually pipe the chocolate onto so that the chocolate doesn't fall onto the glass. And I just need to tape this in place so it stays secure for wrapping. This is another reason I cut it actually slightly shorter than the label, because tape, I discovered, does not stick well to glass, but it will stick to the label. So this, again, is going to form the structure around which I'm going to wrap the chocolate. As the cake was in my cake wrapping video, this is the primary support piece. Now, to pipe the chocolate strip, I've cut a different template. For this, I like to work with flat sheet parchment paper that doesn't have any curve to it, and I get it in big pieces, large increments like this, and I cut it down to size. And the reason I like to do that is because if it's off the roll, it'll curl up on me as I'm piping my chocolate, and that's just really distracting. So to do this particular pattern, and again, you can do an infinite array of patterns. I'm just going to do a relatively easy one for you that doesn't take as much precision or control as my wrap on the cake. I've cut a strip, and you might ask, well, gee, how long should that strip be? Well, it depends on what you're wrapping it around. And because this was 3 inches, I cut my strip about 3 times pi. This is where the math comes into the equation, which is 3.14. So about 9 inches long, plus I added about 1 inch. And I add that inch because as I add chocolate, it's going to take a little bit more than that 9 inches to wrap all the way around and not have a gap at the back. Plus I like a little bit of overhang, and I'll show you how I remove that later. It's just easier to attach it later. I've got a lower part, which has the white and dark chocolate, and an upper part, which is sort of this squiggly pattern. So I've marked that off on the template. It's about 2.5 inches tall in total. So I've marked a guideline for me at 1.25 inches, which is going to mark off those two parts. But I've also left about 1/2 inch on the top for handling room. And you always want to do that when you're doing a wrap, because you have to pick this up and wrap it around something later, and it's going to be impossible to do if you're putting your fingers into the chocolate you've nicely piped. I drew those with pen, so I am going to turn it over so those pen marks don't transfer into the chocolate, which they can do, especially on white chocolate. You'll see it. It'll definitely transfer into either chocolate. I'm working with a high-grade couverture chocolate, which is a chocolate intended for piping. Its fat content is 100% cocoa butter, so there are no fat substitutes like palm oil in it. And that's an important distinction because some of the cheaper chocolates like Nestle's and Hershey's will have palm oil substitutes in them. They never melt as flowy as these higher grade chocolates do. They're much harder to pipe with, and they'll also set up much more quickly. So if you're a slow piper, it may be hard for you to get through the whole strip if you're working with something like a Nestle's brand. Not to ping on the brand because it's great for other uses. It just happens not to be great for this kind of piping work. Also, I have not tempered the chocolate, which is a process of bringing the chocolate up and down through different temperature phases so it sets up really crisp and solid and stands well at room temperature. I haven't done that just because it's a shortcut, but if you know how to do that and would like to do that and you pipe relatively quickly, I would encourage you to do it with this project because this chocolate is freestanding. So over time it'll soften at room temperature, and it's less likely to do that if it's tempered. In a future video I'll address the whole tempering issue, but for now you can work with it either way. This chocolate here was also untempered. I've had this out at room temperature now for at least 15 to 20 minutes, and the chocolate hasn't wilted. So it's quite possible to do it either way. But if you're a beginner and piping slowly, then untempered is probably better because tempered chocolate will set up more quickly on you. Okay, enough said. I'm gonna get piping. I've got my chocolate in the bag, just melted, couverture chocolate, and I'm going to test it on my work surface first and then start by just tracing along the bottom for a little bit of reinforcement and along that central guide line. And my forefinger is just steadying the tip of the cone. I pipe a lot more quickly with chocolate than I do with royal icing because it flows faster, so I have to keep up with it, if you will. Okay, I'm gonna do it kind of a scrolly upper edge, so I'm not going any higher than that 2.5-inch guideline that I marked out earlier. And we're roving everywhere in between. And I'm just kind of reinforcing the end points just for a little more stability. And I'll start with the top. All I do there is just draw loops up and down. Up and down, pretty tight little loops. They're probably, maybe 3/16. Not quite 1/4 of an inch apart, just shy of that at the bottom. And you just want to make sure that all the chocolate connects, because if it doesn't, the lace will fall apart when you take it off the bottle once it's wrapped around the bottle. I'm square on looking at the lace wrap. You know, I'm not piping on the diagonal because otherwise these things I'm piping will be crooked. So it's important to orient yourself to what it is you're piping. And these are pretty easy patterns because if they look irregular, I don't know, they're just forgiving. You know, I don't have to be as exacting with this particular pattern, whereas the daisies on my cake was much more precise. Okay, I want to do a little zigzag border at the top. Just replicating the one that's right in front of me. This is kind of a random squiggle pattern at the bottom, so I'm just going to do some curly Q lines. And again, this is very easy. You can pretty much do anything. And we're going to come back in and fill those holes, with white chocolate. So there's a little, so the bottom half of this is solid. And I like some of it to be solid because then it's a better receptacle for things. If it's all lacy, sometimes softer mousses and fillings will flow out of it, and you don't want that to happen. Just gonna make these a little tighter here. Okay, I'm gonna go now, put down my dark chocolate, get my white chocolate. I've melted it just the same way, just melted it so it's just fluid. If you overheat, white chocolate has a tendency to get thick very, very quickly, and then it's really hard to pipe. So you wanna melt it in a double boiler over low heat and watch it like a hawk. Just pull it when it's just melted. So I'm gonna grab that, fill this in, and we'll finish off the piping of the lace. Okay, I've got my white chocolate here, just cutting a little hole in the tip, and I want to test the flow on my work surface. Get those glasses back on because I'm going to need them. And mind you, my dark chocolate's still not set up. So when I lay this white chocolate in, I want to be careful not to commingle it with the dark, which is why I'm using a pastry bag rather than just smearing it along the bottom, because I don't want to smear the pattern, the dark pattern. And I'm just going to, this part's a little tedious, but it makes for a fun effect. And imagine doing this with different colors of chocolate, which is possible too. And it's okay if you overflow these little openings because this is the back side of the chocolate. This part's going to wrap up against the bottle, so you're not going to see the fact that I've run over some of those dark lines. But what I'm not doing is my tip is above the chocolate, so I'm not dragging my tip in that dark chocolate, so hopefully I'm not smearing any of it. I try to push it a little bit into the hole itself because I don't want to leave any air pockets. Okay, now since the chocolate is untempered, I want to get it into the fridge pretty quickly. If I just sat this out here and let it set up at room temperature, gradually over time, my chocolate would bloom. It would get a kind of gray haze on it. But if I put this into the fridge, as soon as I'm done piping it, that will suppress the bloom as long as I don't bring my product in and out of the fridge a lot after it's piped and set up. So I'm moving this into the fridge to partially set up. I also handily did this on a cutting board, because this makes it really easy to move to the refrigerator without having to move the strip. So be sure you're moving it on something that'll fit into your refrigerator. This shouldn't take more than 1 or 2 minutes, depending on the temperature in your fridge. Okay, so it's been in the fridge chilling to the point that I can pick it up without it dripping. It could even be a little more set up than this, if you'd like, as long as it's still pliable. I'm just gonna secure the back to my bottle and use the cutting board as the guide on the bottom to wrap it all the way around. It's okay if it overlaps a little bit. I'm only gently pressing it there because I do need to unattach it once it's fully set up. But that's looking pretty good. It goes back now into the fridge to fully set up before I can remove the wrapper. Okay, so this has been chilling now for a few minutes, and the chilling time will vary depending on the temperature of your fridge. This one took a little longer than usual, but one telltale sign that it's ready is the parchment will begin to lift away off the chocolate, and there shouldn't be any tension involved in pulling off the parchment paper, or the chocolate isn't set up enough. Okay, so when I come to the back here where there's overlap, before I pull the parchment out, I need to take that chocolate that's on top off, or I'll take all the chocolate underneath it off too. So I'm just going to score it and gently remove it if I can. Just so that it's clear of any chocolate on top, and then I should be able to remove the outer parchment. So that's step one. The next step is getting the bottle out. You want to make sure you've disengaged the tape if it's not popping off on its own. But this, I disengaged the tape, it's coming out. And then just ever so gently lift the parchment out of the inside. If it's sticking, it means the chocolate has gotten soft, and we want to set that back in the fridge to chill it up before we remove that paper. And if the chocolate's really set up, it should do that pretty much on its own. You want to do this really carefully. And there you have a completed cylinder. Hi, I'm back. I've got my lace unmolded, and I just set it gently on the plate. I picked it up by the part that has the white and dark chocolate because it's a little more solid than the top part. And I'm going to fill it. These cylinders, as I said, are great for filling with puddings or even ice creams or mousses. I've got a rice pudding that I made earlier, and I'm going to funnel it in here with a pastry bag with a large opening in the bottom rather than spooning it in, because I have more control and I'm less likely to plop it on the side of the lace and break it. And I'm just going to fill it up, probably, it's an ample serving up to where the white chocolate ends, I think. And top it with some berries and mint, and then you've got a fabulous dessert. Again, I want to be a little gentle with these berries so I don't come down on the lace itself. And a little spriglet of mint. So that's just one possible idea for what you can do with these cylinders, and one possible pattern, mind you. There are an infinite number of ways you could actually pipe this, but I like this two-tone effect. If you haven't seen my other lace videos, do check them out. I've got one where I wrap the entire sides of a cake, and also one where I do flat doilies, which is actually the beginner place to start if you're doing anything with chocolate because it lies flat. Till then, live sweetly.